Welcome everyone to the webinar. Appreciate you joining us. Mesa, how are you? Welcome.
I'm good. How are you, Adrian?
Excellent. Looking forward to doing this with you.
Likewise. It's a very
Great.
important topic.
Yeah. So I know it's something that we've been talking about on and off
Mhm.
individually, and we thought it'd be good to get together and do a webinar on this subject about cybersecurity.
Mhm.
Being in technology, humans, and HR is intriguing to me because it's not as straightforward.
It's not straightforward. It's not a likely collaboration, but it's a very important one.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And it's something that we see our clients and people we talk to, they struggle with that when it comes to cybersecurity. So
Mhm.
let's get right into it. I was fortunate enough to go to a hockey game last night to see the Leafs,
Yeah.
and this is a picture from last night. Uh, they're on a 5-on-3 for part of it, which is always it's intense.
Mhm.
And while I was watching that, it made me think about our webinar today, because often as small businesses, this is how we feel. We feel like things are stacked against us when it comes to um, protecting our organizations from attacks.
Yeah.
There, we might be a small business of 20, 30, 50
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
but there's nation states out there that are actually trying to disrupt Western businesses.
Yeah.
So it feels daunting. It feels daunting.
It
And
certainly is. Yeah. And for both of us, we're both small business owners, and I often find us wearing multiple hats. The business leader has to be the IT person. Sometimes they have to do HR. They have to do everything. So it's really daunting and overwhelming. And I think when I look at stats last year alone, like 2023, 73% of small and medium businesses in Canada were victims of cyber attacks, and this went up from 58% in 2021. So it's a huge jump, and we're seeing this trend that will continue to rise. So it's not a small risk for businesses. It's a huge risk.
yeah.
Mhm.
And one thing we find is, especially small businesses, when they do get attacked or if something does leak, their first impulse is to keep it quiet, which might be the correct response in some cases. So even if, as an organization, we ourselves have not been affected that we know of, what about our vendors that have our information? What
Yes.
about the people that we trust, that we work with, people outside of our organization? So it is quite a serious topic. And as you mentioned, it's very common for businesses to be affected by this in some way.
Yes. It's absolutely very common. Yeah.
Yeah. So through our discussion today, we were we were thinking of ways that we can help businesses with tips that do not include you need to buy this to have cybersecurity.
Hmm.
Because it's such a fear and it's so prevalent, at least in the technology side, I find that many will market to that fear, and they'll say, work with us and be secure, or buy this and be secure. It's not as simple as that. In
Yeah.
fact, it would almost be easier if it was that simple. If we could just buy a product for X amount of dollars and have 100% security.
Yeah. Yeah. Every company is subject to this. Even I remember LastPass, which is software used to protect your passwords, to protect your data, was actually hacked. So I think relying on a system alone without having a process is a big risk.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
So we're going to look at holistic approaches.
Mhm.
And this really speaks to the maturity of our firm, our organization. And it goes much beyond just applying a quick fix or a patch to something to make sure that we're secure, or some vague concept like that.
Mhm. And I think this holistic approach is the reason why you and I are collaborating, right? Because it's not an IT issue, it's not an HR issue. It's actually an organization issue where everybody needs to collaborate and find a solution.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So before we get started, maybe we can just have some introductions. So Mesa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a founder and CEO of a firm called ScaleX, and ScaleX was really started almost 6 years ago now. with one intention. I wanted to help companies move from small to mid-size to scale. And the way we do it is through solving three big problems. The talent problem. So what does talent look like for now and later in the future? What are the processes that need to be in place to help companies grow? And then finally, it's the structure of the organization. It plays a big role in scaling companies. So I work with small, mid-sized businesses to take them from small to scale, and I spent the majority of my career in HR. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart.
Excellent. Okay,
Mhm.
thank you for that. And for any who don't know me, I'm Adrian Scudi. I am the founder of Streamline IT. So we're an IT firm. We partner with companies to assist them with their IT. Basically, become their full service IT department. Growing up in the 90s, my parents bought a small business. They had a few computers, and the hassle that they went through to just keep those computers running and their data backed up, it was incredible. And of course, I observed that as a young child. So when I started Streamline, my original goal was to solve that issue so that businesses would have a consistent, reliable source to look after their IT. It started with just like a mechanic, just keeping things fixed and working, functioning. But over the years, that was 15 years ago I started. Over the years, it's evolved into much more than that. Now it's a lot more about proactively protecting systems, and security is by far the biggest part of that. And a lot of security extends outside of IT.
Mhm.
It's not only an IT issue; it extends outside of IT issues, and therefore there's no IT solutions. It has to go into the people, which again is why we're doing this collaboration today.
Mhm.
So just a quick note on any interactivity or questions. We're streaming to Teams webinar, and we're also streaming on LinkedIn. So feel free to post your questions there. We'll try to incorporate them in our webinar today. If we miss them and we're not able to, then we'll follow up with you individually afterwards, and we can answer that based on our expertise, whoever that the question matches better, if it's an HR question or if it's an IT question.
Mhm.
Great. So let's get into it. First, before we get into the 5 steps that we can take, it's worth it for us to consider some of the risks when it comes to a breach. So um, we've seen a few uh, with some with our clients, really nasty ones with companies that haven't been our clients that have come to us after a breach. And I know that you've been around this as well, Mesa.
Mhm.
So um, these are some of the risks that we would put together when we were coming up with this. So financial, that's an obvious one. There's usually some type of financial loss, and because in the end, all of this, with a few exceptions, is based on money. Even
Yeah.
the nation state actors that are just looking to disrupt, Western business, they're also looking to fund their departments. So they're also looking for money, and that's a great way for them to disrupt businesses by soaking
Yeah.
tens, hundreds, millions of dollars out
Mhm.
of businesses. Um,
And this is specifically relevant actually for small businesses because the average loss to, let's say, just ransomware is $1.92 million for a small mid-sized business. So that's a big number.
Incredible.
This can actually sink your business. You're out of business, right? If you don't have like a contingency in place. So it's a big, big, big deal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
The next one we have down is reputational. So um, I know of quite a few firms. If you type in their firms that suffered breaches, unfortunately, that had confidential information leaked online, if you Google the name of the firm, maybe the first post on Google is their website, but the second is such and such firm or such and such organization suffered a breach attack, blah 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 blah, and it's very negative, and that almost beyond the financial, that is a long, it's a very slow, uh, a slow burn. That's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking of, a slow burn negative effect because it can stick with you for years.
Yeah, and I think consumers are becoming a lot more aware now. They look for things like this. Do I want to do business with a firm that has been subject to cyber, crime, or cyber attack, even though like with the best intentions, like we don't want our data to be subject to be compromised. So it is a huge deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent.
Mhm.
Yeah, true. The third one here is staff. And I've seen it with, and just a comment about staff as we go through this. Sometimes I run a business, you run a business, and we have staff. And sometimes the more staff that you have and the more disconnected you are from, if you're running a business with tens, hundreds of people, you might generalize them as being gullible.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. If someone was gullible to attacks or to schemes, they would have all their credit cards already maxed and their bank account would be empty already,
Hmm.
because we get them on a personal level daily.
Yeah.
So that's not true. Most staff, they want to do a good job. That's what I've seen as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and I think the smarter people sometimes fall victim to this because,
Yeah.
it's not about how smart or how gullible it is about education and awareness, right? So if you're not educating your team and not helping them with tools, then you can't blame them for making a mistake. This stuff keeps evolving and it's very complex. So your job as a business owner not only is to manage risk and navigate through risk, but to educate your staff, because they can get really demoralized and nobody wants, like, a customer doesn't want to work with you. People
Mm.
don't want to work for you if you're not careful with this stuff. Yeah.
And that point about demoralizing,
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest effects that I've seen. You know, you have a really sharp, smart staff member
Mhm.
that gets bamboozled, as it were, by
Yeah.
a scam artist. They feel crushed afterwards. It takes a long time for them to feel competent again. So that is a big risk, staff,
Huge.
and just crushing them under the weight, feeling like they were taken.
Yeah.
Is a big thing.
Hmm.
Productivity, that also is big. Um, Depending on the type of attack, some organizations, some firms have been down weeks. Where they're not able to generate business, they're not able to invoice for their time, for instance, if it's a legal firm.
Yeah.
And that also is quite crippling, not able to keep commitments and promises to their clients.
Absolutely.
And lastly, ethical. um, right now there are uh, for instance, in legal, there's ethical standards that you have to report to your clients. If there's an exposure of their data, that's never a pleasant conversation. You basically have to let them know, hey, look,
Mm.
we made a mistake, or for whatever reason, your data has been lost through us, and you have the right to sue us if you want to.
Yeah.
Um, there's also This will also grow too, because there's a few bills in front of the Canadian Parliament. Not sure if they're going to go through. That's going to comply all businesses to report
Hmm.
um, any breaches or any private data loss. So
Yeah.
that's a fifth risk.
Absolutely. And as a business, like, I see my client data as my responsibility. So I have an ethical responsibility to protect that. So, if you're not careful as a business leader, then you're jeopardizing your ethical and moral responsibility towards your clients. And that's a big risk.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
So as we advertised, we're going to look at 5 cybersecurity measures that your firm, your organization can take um, to mature and to, uh, we don't want to use the word prevent, because there is no absolute. We're just looking at degrees, kind of like there's no absolute security on your house. You're just making it harder for a criminal to break in. But if they wanted to, they could.
Yeah.
But to increase your defense against cyber attacks.
Yeah. And Adrian, for those who don't know the term maturity models,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you can explain what that means.
Yeah, certainly. So maturity is more, at least the way I view it,
Mhm.
it's more of a holistic.
Yes.
It's not just a patch. Okay, we're going to do this here. We're going to tell that person to do that there. But the culture is
Yeah.
matured to the point where all of your staff, and I think we'll talk about this as we go through,
Mhm.
But instead of just going to work like a drone, like they just have this input and output job, but they're thinking on their feet. They understand the values and the mission of the business, and they understand how to protect the business. Every single staff member should have that.
And it's a process. It's an evolutionary process. It's not like once and done. It's the maturity continues to evolve as the organization and the complexity and the number of people, the number of interactions and transactions evolves. Then you need to mature further on this spectrum.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
Mhm.
Okay, so our first, these aren't in any particular order, but this is one that we see the most from an IT perspective, is having a maturity around financial processes. And so one of the easiest and the quickest schemes that we see is a message from, as it says here, from the CEO to say, hey, look, we have this purchase going through. I need you to wire money to a vendor in the US for a new truck we just bought. And I need it done, today. It's urgent. And that message will come when the CEO is on vacation and you can't call him and you can't reach him. So there's that element of urgency, and there's that element of fear, perhaps, if I don't complete this process or if I don't complete this request, then I could be in trouble.
Yeah.
What we always encourage our clients to do, and that's why we invited our clients to this webinar as well, is to have a clearly stated and communicated process when it comes to any type of financial requests.
Mhm.
And that process should include having a double check. There should always be a double check. If there's something where you have to wire money to a new account, you have to change an account, it should always be confirmed by voice. If you got the request through an email, if you
Mhm.
got the request through Teams, then maybe send them an email, or voice is good. But it should always be through a second channel of communication, just to make sure.
Yeah.
Is that something you recommend too?
I'd recommend the same thing. And it's interesting with this stuff is like if something is so out of character, like, CEO, like you've never heard from the CEO ever. And then you get a note from the CEO asking you to do something so outrageous like this. Like, I think, most of us actually, like, if you're not used to having these conversations, you don't even think about it. You don't think twice. And you assume, yeah, of course, the CEO, I'm going to respond and do it. And this is when we get to the culture, we need to build those thought processes and critical thinking, say, oh, this doesn't sound right. Like, why would the CEO ask me to do this, right? But we don't question things, and we're not teaching people to question things. And that's actually a huge part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for new hires, right? Like, they don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I can say every single person that we've hired on our team for the past 3 years, within 2 weeks of coming on board, they get an email from some random Gmail account that says from my name, with my name in the subject line or something.
Yeah.
And we have all the spam filters in place. We have all the security in place, but they put my name in the subject line because that doesn't get caught. And it says something like, "Hey, can you send me your cell phone number? Right? I have a request for you."
Yeah.
So, person on our side, if they were to fall for that, they could send back the cell phone number and then have a text conversation. Now,
Hmm.
the reason I think that they prey on people that are new is because all of this, everyone that works here on our team knows that I would never message them on their personal cell.
Yeah.
Right? We only communicate through Teams. I don't even have the personal cell numbers of our team, most of our team.
Yeah.
So that would be, when they've been here a little while, that's something that they would know, and they wouldn't. They would be hardened to that type of approach. But
Exactly.
someone new, they just started. They haven't had too much interaction with me because they're working under their manager. They're not sure, and they're eager to please, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's where they get caught off guard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Which brings to a good point. Financial processes, that goes, generally we think about the most vulnerable area is the accounting team, the finance team,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
is the most vulnerable area ongoing. But it is important to share those principles or those processes with really everybody, even if they don't have a company credit card.
Mhm.
So it's really really essential to get that out there.
Yeah.
Another thing that we saw with one of our clients. I believe they actually caught this in time, but it was close call. Um, they had an email from one of their staff members from a Gmail account, seemingly personal Gmail account,
Yeah.
that said, "Hey, I just switched banks. Would you mind updating my payroll records to do a direct deposit to my new bank account?" Right? It's Gmail. So they thought, well, they're emailing us from their personal email address. And so the payroll clerk went in and just updated it as requested.
Yeah.
I believe they caught it before the next payroll run. If not, they will let one payroll run go by before they caught it. But just something so simple like that, where you're just not thinking, it just catches you off guard. And
Yeah.
perhaps that person passed you in the hallway and said, "Hey, did you get my message?" But they're talking about something else. We get so many attacks. It just, that one little incident where it kind of lines up, we kind of let our guard down. That's where we need to have ironclad processes in place so that everyone knows what to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, the next step we were going to discuss is one of those lovely,
Everybody's favorite.
yeah, one of those lovely IT acronyms, MFA.
Mhm.
Everyone loves IT acronyms, especially, well, IT guys, we love them, but no one else does. But the reason why we included this in here is not to get into the weeds of the IT part, but the principle of it, just like we were talking about with financial processes, now everyone has a username and a password, but we kind of treat that in the IT world as not
Mhm.
secure enough. And it's not just in the IT world. You cannot get cyber insurance if that's all you're using, just a username and a password,
Mhm.
because that is easy to be phished out of a person, that password, or broken through. So multi-factor authentication basically means there's a secondary thing that's confirming you are who you are. Usually that's through your cell phone.
Mhm.
But the reason I wanted to bring it up with you here is because often we get pushback from staff on this.
Yeah.
Two things. One is, we might be working with a staff member, perhaps they're a little bit older, they've been in their jobs for 20, 30 years. They remember when their computer didn't even have a password, they just turned it on, and now they have to go through all these steps.
Yeah.
And they're just so frustrated. They say, this is such a hassle. I don't want to do this. I can't do my job if I have to be answering all these questions. The second thing we get is, I don't want to use my personal cell phone for this, for anything with a company, because they may not have most people don't have company cell phones now. So what would you say? How would you get around that from an HR staff perspective?
Yeah, so I think the one thing I would not recommend is to say to people like, point blank, this is the policy. Like, I think this is not the right approach for this. And I would approach it as, I would use a change management thing to address it, because people need to understand why you're asking them to do something, right? It's not just to make their life harder. It's to explain the actual risk inherent in not doing it. So to me, it's about having multiple conversations. This is sometimes a culture shift. This is a skill that people, need to learn to build, as a second habit to be really primed for safety and security. But it really starts with having good conversations around why, the risk. If you have examples that happened before, share them, right? Like, help people understand the actual what this risk means. Like, let's not, take it as an elephant in a room. Let's make it visible and help people understand. And yes, it's annoying. I hate it, right? But I do it because it's the only way to protect my client data, my own data, my personal data from potential hacks. So I think it starts with the why, and you need to repeat those conversations, unfortunately, multiple times, right, until it becomes a cultural thing.
Yeah, I have a little secret. I hate it too. And in my family, my kids, I turned it on for my kids because I don't, they're easy prey to get hacked as
Of
well,
course.
and they hate it as well. And they always come to me and they hold me responsible.
Nobody wants it. You can skip it, you'll skip it. I know most people would, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, if you're dealing with sensitive data like financial data, customer data, if you're a law firm, then you have very confidential data, or healthcare. That's scary, right? You
yep,
can't take that lightly. So but like for me, my approach to this is not to hide behind a policy, because that's just gonna turn people off, right? We want to engage people in a conversation and encourage the good behavior, not punish the bad behavior.
So when we were going over this as well, but also from what you mentioned now, I've learned from this because this is a
Mhm.
conversation we're having with our clients on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And we have lots of communication with the management team around the importance. They get it. But perhaps when we implement this, the person that's on the floor, as it were, or the intern or the clerk at the desk, they haven't had these conversations. And maybe we need to do a better job of communicating that to everyone in the company,
Absolutely.
from all levels of at all levels of the org chart, so that they're on board with the reason.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So good tips there. Let's
Yeah,
go to
you
the
can't
next.
over communicate with this stuff. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think we've already touched on a few things here,
Yeah.
but culture and HR. So what are
Yeah.
some comments you have here? What are some things you see that most organizations can use to improve here?
Yeah. I think, I see a lot of policy, right? Like I see a lot of emphasis on policy, and that's great. You can download a policy online, right? It's not really rocket science. I think the issue with policy is that if you don't spend the time, if you don't invest the time to explain a process that is understandable, tangible, and implementable, people don't care about policy. A lot of people, when they get hired, you give them a bunch of policies to review and they sign. We don't know actually if
Mhm.
they read it. How do you know? How do you know if they read it? How do you know that the important points are captured and explained? And so for me, data
Well, they
breach.
signed it, so we're protected.
Yeah, exactly. We're protected with it our part, and human brain wants an easy way, right? Like so
Yeah.
that's normal human psychology. But I think of data breach as a culture issue, right? If your culture does not encourage transparency, communication, and really empowering people to talk about this stuff and even question a policy, right? Like if your policy is old and doesn't make sense, people should be able to question that. And I think that's back to your point about maturity. You want people to feel like owners of this process, not just implementers blindly, because that's a recipe for not doing anything, right? So HR toolkits, they're great, they're fantastic. We have all the checklists, we have all the policies, but if you're not actually sitting down and explaining what that means, if you're not modeling the behavior, if you're a leader who talks about a policy but then does the opposite, guess what? You're creating a pattern of behavior that's not conducive to safety and security, right?
Hmm.
So for me, it is definitely not a policy issue or a checklist issue. It's a process and a communication and a culture issue. So it's very
Mhm.
important to have those conversations.
So when a new person comes on,
Mhm.
instead of giving them a stack or a digital stack of policies and say, okay, read through these and sign them,
Yeah.
what do you recommend? Because there can be a lot of information there.
Yeah, I recommend that, the stack can be there, but I recommend that the biggest important pieces to be addressed,
Mhm.
in a conversation, right? And that's the whole framing around why. Why are we doing this? Stories are powerful. If you are a firm that had issues in the past, or even risk, like you've seen people receiving those emails and you've dealt with it properly, then these are teaching moments and they should be part of the orientation and the onboarding. Also, the power of data. Right now, data is the new currency. It's not just like something you store in a hard drive and you forget about it. It's a vital part of your survival as a company and a firm. So that culture is really important. So for me, conversations, sit down and have an onboarding conversation, not just here's your folder, good luck, and let
Yeah.
me know if you have any questions, because nobody's going to read that. I wouldn't
Yeah.
really. I write the policy, but I wouldn't. If somebody gives me a huge document, I'll be like, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spend the time and effort unless I'm a lawyer or somebody who really, you know, is meticulous about this stuff. So
Yeah. It's like mortgage or insurance policies. No one reads them.
yeah, yeah, we probably should, but
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but teaching moments, conversations, telling stories, and making it really okay and encouraged for people to talk about, like, if they mess up something, right? Who doesn't make mistakes? It's part of learning. And if you don't catch the small mistakes early on, then they turn into big mistakes and crisis. And this is why 73% of small and mid-sized businesses are sadly victims of this stuff, because we
Yeah,
don't see it as a priority. We don't treat it as a priority.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
good points. I think that kind of went into our fourth point too, or it leads nicely to it at least,
Yes.
is
Yeah.
information inventory.
Yes.
So a lot of businesses now, it's funny, not too long ago, let's say maybe 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, everyone would have a desk and then have maybe a typewriter on the side, right? Or a computer on the side. That would be like a side table. They'd have to pull it up to check some emails or something. Going back even further, it was maybe a typewriter or something. Now everyone comes into work and all they have in front of them is a screen. That's it. All of our work, all of the time we spend every day is being inputted into a computer. It's
Mhm.
really the inventory of a business. So what business that had physical inventory would just let staff take them whenever they needed, keep them at their home, have a couple in their car? They weren't quite sure where everything is. That would never happen. Every year, a company that has physical inventory will go around and count everything, and they adjust their inventory, and they try to make sure that inventory control is in place. That it could never work otherwise. But with information, we don't do that. Sometimes, right? Or at least, it is harder, but because it's a little bit abstract, one common mistake we see is that companies don't even know where their information is. You know, they someone on the team may open up a WhatsApp channel. Let's just as an
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
So the company has Teams, they have Outlook, that's all corporate controlled. But one of their sales team opens up a WhatsApp group personally among the sales group, and they start sharing documents there. That's company information. Someone on that team, let's say they leave the company, maybe they're a little bit bitter, or let's say their phone gets compromised. Let's say it's maybe a child gets on their phone, or someone, they lose it and it gets compromised. Now all that company information can be leaked, right? And it's not even it's not the company's fault because they didn't put it there, but you're the one that bears the risks, bears the results.
Yeah.
So there's so many examples that we can talk about here, but this is a people process, because from an IT perspective, there's no way for us to prevent a private WhatsApp group being created, or a Dropbox account, or WeTransfer, or any of these tools out there
Mm.
that people will set up to make work easier. But now you have things spread everywhere. What do you recommend for that, Lisa?
I think it's the same recommendation, is to have those conversations. I mean, the word control is good, but like control is really meaningless if people don't understand why these things are in place. I remember when I actually, early in my career, I worked in the insurance industry, and privacy was a big deal then, because there's like underwriting information and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
we had paper files. And there was a process, like actually that culture was really good, because if you left a paper folder on your desk and left for the day, you had a pink slip on that folder to remind you that don't do it next time. It wasn't intimidating, it was fun, but it was like really building those and it's actually not from management, it's from your peer. So peer would tell you, will share that insight with you. So I think it really is about culture. Control is about culture, and it's about understanding the value of data, understanding why you shouldn't, use this data very casually, right? And file transfer or hard drives, who has that and why, and sometimes you just get too big
Mm-hmm.
with a new hire. They want to use a different system, and you just never think to have those conversations. You don't question it. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, we'll do that. And no, you should question that, because data everywhere is a scary scenario.
Very.
Hmm.
In fact, Disney just got a huge hack. It was a few months ago, I think.
Uh-huh.
And it was because someone on their team set up a Slack. They don't use Slack as a corporation, but someone set up a Slack group. There's a pile of information that got dumped on there over the years, and it was leaked.
Yeah.
And so now they came out with a policy, and they've instructed their organization, you're
Yes.
not allowed to put company information on any other channels other than the work approved ones.
Yes. And actually, this reminds me of something that when people leave an organization, I mean, onboarding is a huge thing because you want to educate people as they join the company. But when they leave, what are they keeping with them? Like data, instrument, equipment, cell phones,
Yeah.
hard drives. Do you actually spend the time to make sure that all their access is disconnected? Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That, and, ideally from a technology perspective, if the corporation knows where their information is, if they have a good inventory, then if you have a person resign, and even if they're completely amiable, they're moving on to their next, and which most times it is like that. Most people aren't genuine, are not generally bad. Most people are not bad, 99%. And they don't leave on, regrettable terms.
Yes.
But regardless, even if they leave on a perfectly good terms, if they resign and their last day is Friday, then Friday, and they're leaving at Friday 5 p.m., as from an IT perspective, we want to have their access to company information shut down by 5:01.
Yes.
Right? It's not, you don't trust them. It's just good, clean policy to have.
Yes.
And that goes nicely into our fifth point: need to know access. And so, of course, people that have left don't need to know have access to anything. But even people that move around the company, for instance, you might hire a person and they're a finance intern, but they're fantastic at talking to people, and you move them into sales. Do they still have access to the finance folder? And so it's important to regularly review who has access to what.
Yeah.
And this makes any type of breach, if that person in sales now gets breached, then whoever can get into their account doesn't have access to all the finance and the sales. They just have access to the sales. So it narrows the impact, the blast radius, I
Yeah.
guess, of a breach.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and no one in the company, ideally, other than maybe the CEO or someone at the very top of the org chart, needs to have access to everything. So if you have a company, your company has one shared drive and everyone just dumps everything in there, that's a huge, huge red flag.
Absolutely. And for me, like back to the culture piece and empowering people to really question this, I would, in an ideal world, you want the employee to say, why do I still have access to this? Right? Even if somehow human error, they still had access and nobody took the time to remove that access. But as an employee who's been, we assume
Hmm.
everybody's good, right? Everybody wants to do good. We want to get to a point where employees themselves say, this doesn't make sense. I shouldn't have access to this, and question it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Mhm.
We have about little less than about 4 minutes left now of our webinar. We want to respect everyone's time,
Mhm.
but we appreciate everyone being with us today. Just to follow up personally, if you want to take a quiz, we've set one up here on cybersecurity. We talked about business maturity. And so that will ask questions about your business and give you a maturity score. So if you're interested, you can go there. That basically, it's a continuation of what we discussed today.
Mhm.
And we also want to stress too, we don't want this all to be scary and negative. We started at the beginning. It's sometimes security can feel overwhelming. Um, we want, the takeaway that we want from this is that it's manageable. We need to continue, as Mesa put, we need to continue evolving our organizational maturity. And if we keep doing that, that puts us in a really good place to avoid the
Mhm.
worst type of threats.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Mesa?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to kind of reiterate that I really see the role of a leader in an organization as one of their key roles is to manage risk. And this is one of the biggest risks of the
Mhm.
century right now. So if you're a leader and this is not, top of mind, then I would question why. So very, very important.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So feel free to take this. We're also going to send out this link
Mhm.
as a recap email. We have a sample policy, I believe, that we can send out that may be helpful. You can reword and add for your own company.
Yeah.
So we hope that these handouts and some of the points that we raised today were valuable, at least to help understand the risks out there, and hopefully to reassure you that your organization is moving in the right direction, or maybe one of those points or a few, maybe areas to start evolving in, start moving forward in.
Yeah.
Um, Security is a big topic. So maybe in the future, we'll see, but we may have a webinar on cyber insurance or what to do if you have a cyber incident, something like that. This is kind of going around my mind right now, but we'll see. We'll be sure to let everyone know if that materializes. So, Mesa, if anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to contact you?
I believe is that my Calendly link?
Yeah.
On the QR code, yeah. I think you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm an open networker, so anyone can reach out to me directly there. I believe this is going to lead you to book a call with me. So if you have any questions about your process, how to have those conversations, you want me to look at your policy, I'm happy to do that. Feel free to reach out to me. Just scan that QR code, and I'll be happy to spend some time.
Yeah, absolutely. And for myself, that QR code there is also for my calendar link. Always happy to have a conversation. It doesn't mean that we necessarily need to work with you, but this is a topic that's dear to my heart, and happy to just hear what challenges you're having and maybe give you some pointers that can improve. So again, just like Mesa said, I'm always happy to have a conversation. So please feel free to reach out anytime. Well, thank you very much, Mesa.
Thanks, Adrian.
Appreciated the conversation.
It's a pleasure.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Take care.